In the headline of his obituary in the Washington Post, 1936, George L. Carter was called the last empire builder. Carter created 3 empires, in iron, in railroad, and in coal. Yet his lasting legacy to us comes not from what has survived of these empires, but rather from the ideal of a 4th empire, the blending of the southern Appalachian region into the economic fabric of the American nation, a process he influenced perhaps more profoundly than any other individual of his time. In Carter, Appalachia produced its own version of Hill, the railroad baron, of Morgan, the financier, Rockefeller, the energy tycoon, and Flagler, the town developer. Unlike his better-known contemporaries, Carter's achievement is perhaps more remarkable, since he did it without leaving home. Though his fortune did not compare with that of other industrialists of this era, he was certainly one of the wealthiest native-born sons of the Appalachian Mountain region. Since childhood, education had been an abiding interest for Carter. Much of his business training was self-taught. In 1909, the Tennessee General Assembly gave Carter the opportunity to make his most significant and lasting contribution to education in this native region. That year, a general education law was adopted, which, among other points, called for the establishment of a normal or teachers training school in each of the state's 3 grand divisions, the East, Middle, and West Tennessee. Rivalries between regions quickly broke out as the establishment of a teacher training school meant jobs, increased economic activity, as well as social, educational, and cultural advancement for the winning city. Johnson City became the scene of intense lobbying for the state normal school. Most of its community leaders worked in the effort, though they gradually came to be divided over the best location in the city. In early June of 1909, community leaders ultimately convinced the city council to approve a $75,000 bond issue for the construction of school buildings if Johnson City was selected. Soon thereafter, the Washington County Court also approved a $75,000 issue, bringing the total of Johnson City's bid to $150,000. During these early developments, Carter himself stayed in the background, biding his time. Certain members of the Johnson City promoters were old Carter rivals who wanted to see the school located on property they owned in the Carnegie section of town. Several times Carter and these gentlemen had competed, each seeking to promote their own holdings. In September, Governor Malcolm R. Patterson and a delegation of the State Board of Education came to Johnson City. It was a part of the tour of cities bidding for the normals. Carter's interest in the location became more public. He was part of a reception committee and several hundred spectators who greeted the visitors. The party toured the grounds of some 120 acres on the western edge of the city owned by Carter, who offered the property free of charge and had convinced city officials to provide free electricity and water. Carter also offered to provide annual prizes of $25 each to honor students. Following an elegant luncheon held at Mountain Home, the Nashville delegation was taken on a tour of the Carnegie Realty Company holdings on the eastern edge of the city. This was some of the same property which Carter had recently attempted to acquire for construction of the Clinchfield Railroad. Yet, being unsuccessful, he had placed the yards in Erwin, Tennessee. The delegation returned to Nashville without making any commitment. The following month, the State Board held discussions with some 22 rival cities in Nashville. On December 1st, 1909, the board announced its decision. The normal schools were to be located in Murfreesboro, Middle Tennessee State Normal School, Memphis, West Tennessee State Normal School, and Johnson City, East Tennessee State Normal School. When this news reached Johnson City, the whistles of the mills and factories sounded a great great news. In February 1910, Governor Patterson led the state board back to Johnson City to make a final decision on which piece of property would be the new school's location. After a tour of the Carnegie property, the delegation seemed to lean toward this site, mostly because it offered more land. Sensing this, Carter supposedly buttonholed Governor Patterson and asked that no decision be made until the board took another look at the property he had to offer. Patterson agreed. During the night, Carter had a construction crew clear the road to the top of a wooded summit overlooking his property, land which Patterson had early asked might be included in the Carter offer. A railway spur line already existed to his property, created in order to haul materials during the construction of his home. Now this line was used to bring in equipment, workers, and rock and gravel for the building of a roadbed. The nearby livery stables of Samuel R. Taylor provided teams and scrapers with which to level the crown of the two hills, one where Gilbreth Hall would later stand and one at a higher elevation known as Reservoir Hill. As if by Aladdin's lamp, Carter created a road overnight. Early the next morning, he awakened J.P. Lyle and paid him $1,400 an acre. He acquired additional property that he needed to make his holdings even more attractive. His work done, Carter greeted the first barber he could find at 6:30 a.m. with a shave before beginning the tour with the board. He took the delegations and carriages up the newly cleared road. From there they could see the whole property, a beautiful piece of rolling, partly wooded farmland valued at some $60,000. The added property and Carter's promise of $100,000 to go with the 120 acres swung the scales in his favor. The board accepted the site, and at last he had his revenge on his Carnegie rivals. Carter's support of an institution of higher education was part of a trend in late 19th and early 20th century America. Great capitalists and entrepreneurs funded private institutions which would be named for them and whose direction that could be controlled to some extent by them. Carter's is a rare case. He helped establish a public institution which would not be named for him and over which he would have no control. Its operations would be taxpayer-supported and directed by school officials in Nashville. It highlights the fact that, unlike many other captains of industry, Carter was not interested in personal glory. An attempt was once made to rename the school after him. Carter squashed this idea. He insisted that he wished no conventional form of memorial from the school. He knew that what he had done, and he needed nothing with his name on it to remind him of this gift. The founding of East Tennessee State Normal School was mutually beneficial to Carter and the school. Its location enhanced the value of Carter's various businesses, his real estate interest in Johnson City. The community and the region benefited from increased educational opportunities, as well as social and cultural advantages brought by an institution of higher learning. Carter not only supported the school with his contributions of money and land, he provided it with one of his first students. In 1911, his son James was enrolled in the Normal School's on-campus training or laboratory school. Carter also took great interest in the grounds of the campus. He paid a professional landscape specialist to help design the grounds and to plant many of the initial trees and shrubs, many of which still may be found on campus today. On April 15, 1910, Sidney G. Gilbreth was appointed East Tennessee State Normal School's first president and ultimately sited the campus. Carter and the board's original intention had been to locate the campus on a wooded hill south of the present campus. While it gave a magnificent view of the surrounding countryside and the blue-gray Unaka Mountains, Gilbreth quietly noted a concern to Carter. "I told him that while the view was magnificent, I was thinking of the hundreds of tons of coal that would have to be hauled up the hill, the climb that would have to be made by the students residing and boarding in the city, and I felt that a better site could be found. Carter then took him aside, and they walked over the hill to where the main building, Gilbert Hall, now stands. Gilbert found a stake and drove it into the ground at what would become the middle of the main building. Later, as engineers began the campus development, they started from this stake in their measurements. The initial campus buildings consisted of the main or administration building, present-day Gilbert Hall, a heating plant, a cafeteria, and a woman's dormitory. This later building was called Carter Hall in honor of Mayetta Carter and is still used as a residence hall. It is the only recognition of his influence on the campus that Carter permitted, being that it honored his wife and not himself. Broad men have narrow egos. With his mansion adjoining the campus, Carter retained a keen interest in the school and regularly could be seen walking the grounds during the remaining years he resided in the city. Long trains still bring to market coal from properties Carter developed over rail lines Carter devised, helping supply the world's energy demand. Readers of the Bristol Herald Courier, in opening their morning paper, are probably unaware that it exists because of decisions made almost 100 years ago by Carter in merging its sickly forerunners. The man driving to work in Kingsport, joined by thousands of other employees in a great modern city, probably does not realize that he is able to make the drive and get a nice paycheck because of Carter's vision in 1905 of an industrial city. The nearly 15,000 students and some 2,000 employees of East Tennessee State University come to campus in Johnson City rather than Sweetwater or Newport or Morristown because of Carter's efforts. Throughout the region, from Roanoke, Virginia, to Spartanburg, South Carolina, to Millersboro, Kentucky, to McDowell County, West Virginia, and many cities and towns in between, to small stores and great factories, people go to work in places which were located there because of George L. Carter. In 100 different ways every day, people are being influenced by the actions of a man they never knew, a man largely forgotten.